dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga pulisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga pulisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan diin ang kahalagahan ng pulisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan!
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERP-P is here for you. SERP-P is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERP-P, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERP-P widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERP-P has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERP-P has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERP-P provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERP-P, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERP-P has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERP-P now. Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga pulisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga pulisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan din ng kahalagahan ng pulisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan.
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERP-P is here for you. SERP-P is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERP-P, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERP-P widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERP-P has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERP-P has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERP-P provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERP-P, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERP-P has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERP-P now. Socioeconomic research portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Good morning, everyone. We'll start in a few minutes. We'll just wait for the PIDS president. Thank you so much. morning, everyone, and welcome to the Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines, knowledge sharing on state of land use policy and governance in the Philippines. And we are very excited to see many participants on site and today via Zoom and Facebook Live. I am Ezekiel Nicomedes, and I will be your host for today's event. Throughout the seminar, we'll be diving into the country's land use governance and discover multifaceted challenges and propose recommendations for effective solutions. We have a lineup of distinguished speakers and experts who will share their insights and experiences in this field. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage our participants to actively engage in today's discussion. For our on-site participants, you will have an opportunity to ask questions for our presenters during the program's opening forum. And for our participants on Zoom, feel free to ask questions and share your thoughts using the Q&A box. And for our Facebook Live and use the comment section. Without further ado, to give a message of support and welcoming remarks, let us welcome the PIDS President, Dr. Aniceto C. Orbeta Jr.
Good morning to all our participants in the PIDS conference hall and on Zoom, and those watching in the PIDS and SERP-P Facebook pages. Welcome to our knowledge sharing forum titled State of Land Use Policy and Governance in the Philippines. Before we formally start, I would like to acknowledge the following esteemed officials on site and online. Development of Academy of the Philippines Director Dorotea Boy Navarro, Bicol University Dean Alex Nepomuceno, National Water Resources Board Water Rights Division Attorney Ribayan Giselle Diaz, Natural Tracks Research Center Chief Stock Specialist Madonna Claire Aguilar, Deputy Executive Director Campaign for Land Use Policy now Maricel Tolentino, Department of Agrarian Reform Under Secretary Luis Minrado Pagulayan, Ateneo School of Government Dean Philip Arnold Tuanio, PhilExport Vice President Maria Flor de Leza Leong, NEDA 7 Regional Director Jennifer Britannia, Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development Undersecretary Henry Yap, Forestry Development Center Director Gervania Dixon. I would like to greet the various representatives from the government, academe, private sector, civil society, and media virtually present today. The PIDS Socioeconomic Research Portal of the Philippines, or SERP-P, hosts this event. More than 20 years ago, PIDS started this vision of having an online repository of socioeconomic knowledge resources that are easily accessible to everyone. Now, SERP-P serves as the country's first online repository of socioeconomic knowledge resources and has evolved into a network with more than 60 partner organizations committed to knowledge generation and open access activities. Today, we are convening the sixth session of the SERP-P Knowledge Sharing Series, an initiative dedicated to exploring and addressing the complex policy issues in the country. In this installment, our expert presenters will comprehensively analyze the myriad land use challenges, offering insightful recommendations and strategic approaches to foster effective and sustainable solutions. This session aims to deepen our understanding and catalyze the meaningful dialogue on improving land use governance, reflecting our commitment to inform actionable strategies in this critical domain. Land use conflicts stems from competing demands of land resources, including food production, water security, housing, industry, and ecological services. The absence of a comprehensive national framework for land use planning and governance exacerbate these conflicts. The proposed National Land Use Act, or NALUA, is a potential solution to these issues, aiming for more sustainable and harmonious land management, and contributing to economic sustainability and development in the country. Despite its potential benefits, the NALUA has not been realized after nearly 30 years of advocacy and legislative attempts. This legislative gap has a wide-reaching impacts beyond just land use conflicts. It adversely affects watershed management, leading to environmental degradation that exacerbates soil erosion, flooding, and affects water resources and quality. Watersheds, the crucial for sustaining economic ecosystems integrity and supporting biodiversity, are under threat, impacting economic and social needs, including climate change mitigation. Furthermore, the absence of a national land use plan contributes to the challenges of rapid urbanization, where sprawling cities experience strained resources and services. This urban expansion particularly affects informal settlers, as highlighted in the United Nations Habitat Philippines, which notes that around 3.7 million families, including 500,000 in Metro Manila slums and high-risk areas, face severe housing shortages and inadequate access to essential services. These challenges underline the critical need for a coherent approach to land governance to address the multifaceted issues affecting millions of Filipinos, necessitating discussions and actions towards sustainable solution. This morning, we are honored to have esteemed presenters from the SERP-P network to discuss this matter further. PIDS Senior Research Fellow Dr. Adora Navarro will be our first speaker, and she will discuss her study on the need for the passage of the NALUA. Following her is former UPLB Chancellor and UPLB College of Forestry and Natural Resources Professor Emeritus Dr. Rex Victor Cruz. He will share his insights on their watershed integrated land use planning project. UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies research analyst Rafael Vicente Di Malanda will further enlighten us on land and housing struggles of the urban poor in Metro Manila. We thank our esteemed speakers for sharing their knowledge and valuable time. In conclusion, this forum highlights our shared duty to manage land resources sustainably. We urge our policymakers, as to say, to protect our land to ensure a sustainable future for upcoming generations. Emphasizing the need for data-driven, evidence-based policies, we advocate for their adoption as a bedrock of effective governance, paving the way for a legacy of responsible and sustainable land use. In addition, this forum demonstrates that in PIDS and SERP-P, we champion the transformative impact of accessible knowledge, advocating for policy-relevant research to be readily available to stakeholders like policymakers, educators, researchers, and students, enabling informed decisions and positive societal change. Thank you, and I give back the floor to the MC.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abeta. Before we proceed with the presentation, I'd like to acknowledge our more than 700 participants via Zoom and on Facebook. So before we dive into the insightful presentations from our esteemed guests, let's take a moment to gather your valuable insights. For our on-site participants, please take out your mobile phones and scan the QR code on the screen. And for our Zoom participants, the link will be posted on the comments on the chat box. And for our Facebook participants, please, we encourage you to click the link and join. So the poll question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the government's effectiveness in land use governance? Okay, let me read it again. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the government's effectiveness in land use governance? Okay, team, can I see the results, please? Okay, let's see the answers of our participants. So majority are number 3. So some meron sumagot din ng number 1 at meron din sumagot ng number 5. 5 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. So it's clear from our responses that there are concerns about the effectiveness of government in land use governance, no? So this feedback underscores the importance of this forum like this, where we can openly discuss challenges and explore solutions together. Okay, without further delay, let's begin our presentation. Today's forum features topics that explores the country's landscape of land use governance. We are thrilled to have Dr. Navarro join us today to share her insightful research. Dr. Navarro is a senior research fellow at PIDS. Her research interests are issues in infrastructure sectors and regional development. She has been serving the PIDS since 2012, interrupted by her stint as the Undersecretary for Regional Development at NEDA from November 2016 to June 2020. She holds a PhD in economics from UP Diliman, a master's of public administration major in economic policy management from Columbia University, New York, and an MA in economics from UP Diliman. She is also Philippine Navy reservist, currently holding a commander rank. To give a presentation for the proposed National Land Use Act, let's give a round of applause to Dr. Navarro.
Good morning. Masyado palang maliit. Perhaps we should have what do you call that? Platform for presenters like me. Hindi ko makita yung ibang on-site participants. Well, okay. Good morning and thank you for your participation in this knowledge sharing forum, and we hope that at the end of it, you would have many takeaways and be our partners in policy reforms. Okay, so this presentation is based on a discussion paper that I did, and it calls for national level legislation on land use governance, dubbed as the National Land Use Act, or NALUA in the Philippines. No? And that actually serves as the main argument for this or in this whole event. No? And we hope that you, our listeners, and also the online participants, can use this as a framework when you listen to the two speakers after me, who will touch on housing and the need for a ridge to reef approach in watershed management. No? And also, as you keenly observe current issues on various issues of land, for example, the Bohol Chocolate Hills issue. No? Okay, so my presentation is divided into three main parts. First is the setting of the argument for why we need a transdisciplinary approach to advocating for the enactment of a national land use law, or in a LUA. Second, which is the main part, is the presentation of data and evidences supporting the need for a NALUA. And third is the enumeration of policy insights and the recommendations. Okay. Let me go to a tracking of the theoretical foundations first. In the economics discipline, the foundational principles of land use analysis are often traced from the classical theories on agricultural rent to the firm-level approaches that employ industrial organization concepts. For example, David Ricardo's 1817 concept of agricultural rent as a result of bidding or competition in the use of land. So that's one foundational principle or concept. Then urban production and consumption, these amenities such as congestion, limit the growth of cities, as analyzed by Weber in 1909, by Marshall in 1916, and other economists afterwards. And what emerges from the review of theoretical foundations are these two principles: sustainable optimization of the benefits and minimization of negative externalities. That is, to utilize land effectively in our land use planning and governance, we must sustainably optimize the benefits from land and at the same time minimize the negative externalities from land use. Then there are contributions of other disciplines such as sociology and natural sciences in analyzing land use changes, and governance. For example, both sociology and the natural sciences employ basic ecological concepts such as dominance, disturbance, and adaptation in viewing the evolution of uses of land. There are many various or many contributions by various fields, and what I have distilled in this study is that we need a transdisciplinary approach to analyzing land use and governance. So the points I listed here can be described using economics, but I believe we need other disciplines to explain these points further, or we need other disciplines language so that other people can understand us better and be part of our policy advocacy. So thus we need a transdisciplinary approach to explain how the multiple uses of land complicate land optimization, how these uses are sometimes competing rather than complementary, why protection and conservation alongside optimization are needed, and how market mechanisms can be used in wielding political power to exclude others from the enjoyment of land use rights. Okay. And in the event that the NALUA is enacted, so kailangan natin implement, we also need a transdisciplinary approach to understanding land use changes, balancing the interests of uses of land, and the users of land, their interests also, and managing land use conflict. So we need a transdisciplinary approach in the implementation. And it's different from multidisciplinary approach. So what I did in the study, a single individual, I use a multidisciplinary approach. I use various lenses to explain something. Transdisciplinary approach is different. It requires collaboration of us in various disciplines. No, it requires collaboration between and among disciplines or those who practice various disciplines. Okay. The question, does the Philippines need a NALUA, can be answered by answering this question. So first, are there conflicting uses of land in our country? Are the existing mechanisms that we use for dealing with the conflicting land uses sufficient? May survey respondents who replied 5 kanina, the highest, no, very satisfactory na for those respondents. I counted 3, no. So but most of the on-site and online participants responded na they're not satisfied, or the existing mechanisms are not sufficient. Then are there negative externalities and disamenities that indicate misgovernance of land uses? Are land use conflicts affecting peace and development and cultural interactions? Are existing land uses optimal and bringing us closer to progress? And finally, is legislating land use governance at the national level the norm as seen in other countries? We will tackle these points one by one. Okay. So the first question, are there conflicting uses of land? Conflicting uses arise when the same parcel of land is deemed allocated for one purpose but is actually being used for another purpose, such as when land supposedly reserved for food security is used for housing or industrial uses, or when there are overlapping claims on the same parcel of land. No, usually we see many examples of this. No, usually overlapping claims by holders of ancestral domain rights, holders of mining and energy development permits, grantees of land for military reservation, stewards of conservation, and implementers of infrastructure projects that need right of way. And then the most often cited illustration of conflict in the use of land is the indiscriminate conversion of agricultural land to non-agricultural uses. And you can see from this graph, no, the whole stack bar, yan yung gross irrigation service areas, and the orange bars, those are the previously irrigated areas that have been converted to non-agricultural uses, no, as inspected by the National Irrigation Authority and reported by the Philippine Statistics Authority. Now, the irrigation service areas that had been converted to non-agri uses from 2012 to 2022 already reached 620,399 hectares. And let's look at the regional data. The regional breakdown of the cumulative figure. Region 3 or Central Luzon had the largest area of converted lands. Marami in Region 3. Note, however, that the NIA data do not show how much of the total converted areas are due to illegal and premature land use conversion. It's the Department of Agrarian Reform, which is in charge of monitoring illegal and premature land use conversion. And we at PIDS are finding it hard to get data from this agency. I heard President Babes mention that Yusek Pagulayan of DAR is one of the participants. I'm glad that he's here. If okay, mangungulit po kami. So that's another problem, monitoring data. And one example is in illegal and premature land use conversion. Now, the second question, are the existing mechanisms for dealing with the conflict, or third question pala, for dealing with the conflicting land uses sufficient? This is how the existing mechanisms work. No? The LGUs have land reclassification powers based on their land use plans, no, the what's called CLUPs, comprehensive land use plans. And then the DAR has the authority to approve the conversion of use of agricultural lands from non-agri to, from agri to non-agri uses. And the president can issue presidential proclamations on land reservations. No? Moreover, there are various legislations granting authority to carve out land for specific uses, no? And these existing legislations are RA 8371 for ancestral domains, RA 7586 for the NIPAS or National Integrated Protected Area System, RA 8435 for the Network of Protected Areas for Agri and Agro-Industrial Development, and also Strategic Agri and Fisheries Development Zones. Then Presidential Decree or PD 389 as amended by PD 705 for forest delineation, PD 1067 for water easements, RA 9147 for critical habitats, RA 11201 for human settlements and urban development, PD 87 and PD 972 for fossil fuel exploration and development, and RA 7942 for mining areas, RA 10121 for the disaster risk reduction and management, and taking into consideration geospatial hazards and risks. So many legislation, no? And given this, conflicts in the use of land are bound to arise. No? There's an existing interagency committee for discussing land use issues, interagency siya, and that's under the NEDA board, the National Land Use Committee or NLUC. I used to chair the USEC level of the NLUC. That's why I got into this Naluwa advocacy. Kumbaga nakilala ko siya, and I saw, I fully understood what this was when I handled NLUC. And the problem is, so this NLUC that leads the interagency discussion of land use issues, but it has no enforcement power and no power to impose sanctions and penalties on public officials and private parties. And besides, there's no framework legislation, there's no existing legislation for national land use, or for existing legislation na may national level authority for governing land use. Now, the many comprehensive land use plans of cities, no, and the provincial development and physical framework plans of provinces, those are being used to justify that we have a mechanism. But many of those remain outdated and incomplete. No? As of July 2023, more than half, 55% of CLUPs are outdated, and 4% of LGUs at the municipality or city level have no CLUPs. Then more than half then in the province level, no, 57% of PDPFPs are outdated, and 10% of provinces have no PDPFPs. I think one of the next speakers no, will have something to say about this. So this state of affairs has adverse implications for optimal land zoning, land reclassification, and settling of land use conflicts at the LGU level. Land zoning by LGUs become unresponsive to the demand for shelter. Hindi ko naman nilalahat, but given you've seen the state of affairs, more than half have no updated plans, no. And yun na nga, this results in this situation na the land zoning by LGUs become unresponsive to the demand for shelter, infrastructure, agricultural production, environmental protection, and industrial development. And in the absence of a national governance and conflict resolution body and a national level legislation, ad hoc solutions are being tried. One example is in Region 10. No? There, they created a regional interagency committee for discussing and settling conflicts. No? Kasi doon there are long-standing conflicts in land claims by holders of certificates of ancestral domain, agrarian reform beneficiaries, and military reservation administrators. So far, what the regional committee has achieved include the preparation of a common geospatial database. They call that one map, and that consolidates all titles and tenurial instruments and helps identify the overlaps in land claims. And there's a sort of a test decision. It's a test decision, which is not yet a final decision because the parties are asked to deliberate who will give up a claim in favor of the other. No, the test case in Salukot, Talakag, Bukidnon, where the Philippine Army's claim conflicts with the claims of agrarian reform beneficiaries. Okay. Are there negative externalities and disamenities that indicate misgovernance of land uses? Evidences of environmental degradation demonstrate the negative externalities that arise from the production and consumption of forest products and watershed services. What I'm showing you, data on increasing number of threatened wildlife species. So that's one evidence. And as you can see from the table, the number of threatened wildlife species continue to rise, continues to rise, the number. Note that I'm not arguing that negative externalities and disamenities can be totally avoided when the NALUA is enacted, no? What I'm trying to say is that the NALUA can help avoid the occurrence of this. Okay. Okay. Now, what I'm showing you ay on watersheds naman. So the increasing number of watersheds assessed with identified hazards, as you can see from these figures, is another evidence. No? The figures indicate the result of the continued degradation of our forest lands and watersheds. And this has adverse implications for ecological balance, food security, health security, disease prevention, and enjoyment by future generations of ecological services. And the proliferation of informal settlements of what they call squatters, that also indicate that these amenities due to misgovernance of land uses. Many of them are in hazard-prone areas. So in this table from the PSA data, housing units are owned or rented without the consent of the owner are interpreted as roughly equivalent to informal settlements. So yung two highlighted rows. And for 2020, the sum is 602,189 informal settlements. are land use conflicts affecting peace and development and cultural interactions? No? As of 2019, the NCIP had issued the certificates of ancestral domain titles covering 5.7 million hectares. However, many of those claims are being disputed. Why? Kasi they overlap with CLOAs or collective certificates of land ownership awards issued by the DAR. So it has been difficult for the IPs to plan and develop their ancestral domains because large tracts of the land that they're claiming are may overlapping claims. And some of them have slopes 18 degrees and above. And the right to develop the land becomes contentious kasi based on the forestry code, land with slope 18 degrees and above are classified as forest lands and automatically belong to the state. The monitoring of land and the resource conflicts by an NGO called the ANGOC, Asian NGO Coalition for Agrarian Reform and Rural Development, from January 2017 to June 2018, uncovered 352 land and resource conflict cases. And the largest number of cases is in Mindanao, 59% of the total. And then next is in Luzon, and then Visayas. Okay. And yet, existing land uses show non-optimal utilization. Data on changes in land use in the Philippines between 2015 and 2020 suggests non-optimal utilization of land. So as you can see from the table, land cover that is considered barren increased significantly by 31.67%. And land use for annual crops, perennial crops and fish ponds, or yung land used primarily for food production declined by 2.86%, 0.16%, and 3.16% respectively. On farm parcels by main use, the latest available data, 2012 data, kasi that 2022 census of agri and fisheries had just been concluded. The results are still being processed. Nevertheless, you can see from the 2012 data, the non-optimal utilization of land. There were still many idle lands, no? 31,270 hectares. And the total farm area declined and the average farm size got smaller. The total farm area of parcels declined by 24.81%. And the size of farms, no, average size, from 1.28 hectares in 2002, that declined to 0.92 hectare in 2012. The irony is that the suboptimal utilization of land is happening alongside stark manifestations of unmet basic need for land, such as socialized housing for the homeless. The figure here shows that as of 2020, there were 12,615 homeless Filipinos, and many of them, 69%, are in the National Capital Region. Now, there are those who are saying that the proposed na law will take away powers of the LGUs and that the existing rules on the land use governance by LGUs are enough. No? May ganong claim. But still, under the present setup, there are many land use conflicts and many cases of land use misgovernance. And also, it bears asking, is legislating land use governance at the national level the norm, as seen in other countries? The answer is yes. The Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, of the United Nations emphasized that as early as 1983. And the Organization of for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, has a compilation of country fact sheets showing the national level legislation and land use. Also, think about this, no? The Philippines has a national level legislation on the use of water, the Water Code of 1976, and in the governance of air as a resource, the Clean Air Act of 1999. Then why not for land? I now come to my concluding remarks on policy insights and recommendations. the effort to enact a NALUA is gonna be 3 decades old already come June. But the advocacy is older than that, no? But the beginning of the first draft, kasi in 1980s there was a call for it already. But I'm tracking it na 3 decades kasi the beginning of the first draft of what is now a proposed na LUA was in June 1994 through a draft National Land Use Code, no, formulated by the executive under former President Ramos, no, and it was sponsored in the 9th Congress. It is now the 19th Congress. No? So let's hope that deliberations would move forward. Yung legislation design can be tackled and improvements identified if deliberations in both houses of the legislature will be scheduled. In the meantime, what can we do? The advocacy for enactment should get stronger. Advocates for the NALUA should employ a transdisciplinary approach in explaining land uses and land use changes and arguing for reforms in land use planning and governance. We need to employ evidence-based arguments for the need for this legislation and argue that the issues raised in the past can be satisfactorily answered. And both houses just need to open the deliberations on the issues. We need to lay down a proposal for upgrading the technical capacity of LGUs in formulating, updating, and implementing CLUPs and PDFPs. No? And we need to argue that LGU powers need not be diminished, and the NALUA can in fact do the reverse. It can empower them through national policies and standards that can make the utilization of land more optimal. And especially for the executive branch, form a stronger advocacy with the participation of all stakeholders, transdisciplinary nga, including local governments, the business sector, and civil society. Okay. Thank you for your attention and good morning once again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Navarro. We kindly ask our on-site participants to hold their questions until the opening forum where we will address them. And for our Zoom participants, please utilize the Q&A box available in the Zoom webinar. And for our Facebook participants, kindly use the comment section to ask questions. The study presented by Dr. Navarro is available in SERP-P and PIDS website. Just kindly click the link for our Zoom participants on Facebook. And we now move on to our next presenter. So allow me to introduce our next guest. Our next presenter is a development worker working at the intersection of housing rights of the urban poor and food security. He brings to this advocacy experience in community architecture and participatory planning and participatory action research. He graduated with a degree in architecture from UP Diliman and has taken units under the graduate studies of UP Department of Anthropology and Community Development. He's a researcher at the program on alternative development of the UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies, where he co-researches with civil society organizations to bring the light grassroots and alternative development perspectives. Let us all welcome Mr. Rafael Vicente de Malanta.
Ayan, magandang umaga po. Again, I'm Arvin de Malanta from the University of the Philippines Center for Integrative and Development Studies, Program on Alternative Development, or UPCIDS ALTDEV. So before I begin my sharing, allow me to introduce briefly UPCIDS ALTDEV. So our program primarily works with people's organizations or POs and NGOs in looking at policies from the perspective of the largely excluded. So the program aims to surface the grassroots point of view along with the different grassroots-led initiatives that respond to the issues related to mainstream development. So Today, on behalf of my co-authors, Professor Bernard Dones of the PUP College of Architecture, Design and Built Environment, and the Urban Poor PO Kalipunan ng Damayang Mahihirap in Sitio San Roque, I will be sharing our research originally titled Asserting Inclusion in Housing and Urban Development from the Barikadang Bayan Community Barricade, Street Occupation, and Tumbalik Collective Home Restoration to the Community Development Plan. So this is part of a monograph on grassroots practices documented across Southeast Asia that was originally published by UPC's ALDEV in 2023. Okay, so as other case studies of alternatives in the same monograph, this research operates from Corten and Claus's concept of people-centered development and also Manalili's putting people in development that is popularized mainly through a maxim, the kaunlaran mula sa tao para sa tao. So this research presents a radical reimagining of how development may be achieved. It argues that the people are very much capable of organizing themselves and directing their development, and it puts people, especially the poorest, at the forefront of development as agents instead of profit motives. As such, it presents how mainstream development practices have not meaningfully addressed the issues of Filipinos, especially the marginalized, and how these are visibly laden with interests of economic elites, and how these are typically carried out in top-down, disempowering, and exclusionary processes, and take the form of destructive forms. So the focus of the research then answers these questions as the other case studies in the said monograph. So how do actors at the grassroots level address the inadequacies of mainstream development? What type of strategies do they employ? What lessons can be learned from these? So today, the case study I will share presents a detailed account of the Sitio San Roque Urban Poor Community in North Triangle, Quezon City, just across where we are right now. So they are faced with optimization of land use and land productivity as articulated in the Urban Development and Housing Act, as well as the profit-seeking interests of the Key Shelter Agency, NHA, the National Housing Authority, the local government unit of Quezon City, and the private developers such as Ayala Land and Surestre Properties Incorporated. So in particular, this research surfaces the different acts of violence committed by these actors. It highlights the responses that the urban poor of Sitio San Roque have come up and mustered to assert their right to be included in development, and it attempts to distill lessons from these experiences. This research is a result of 5 years of community engagement, as well as different workshops and focus group discussions conducted with the residents of the community, primarily the leaders and members of the Urban Poor PO Kalipunan ng Damayang Mahihirap between 2019 and 2023. So briefly, I'll ground on the issues with the Urban Development and Housing Act. So while it institutionalized the shift in housing provision from a subsidized approach to one that is market-oriented, its mandates also provided a degree of legal protection and legitimacy to the struggle for land and housing of the urban poor. But as Karaos points out, it's still largely a product of compromise between the urban poor movement and the politicians who protect the private property interests of the landed elites and developers. So as Arcelia points out, the UDHA provision for the rational and optimal use of urban land and resources underpinned the highest and best use framework dominant in urban planning. He explains this created a condition in which urban land is deemed a commodity to be peddled, and thus land use must yield the highest returns. Or UDHA's mandate to undertake urban land development and housing provision with the private sector made way for various infrastructure developments such as mixed-use townships, transportation projects, and the like to be developed through a PPP or public-private partnership modality. Another scholar, Ortega, argues that this has sustained the ever-increasing housing backlog. It typified the violence against the urban poor and the gentrification of Metro Manila's urban landscape. So in this, the urban poor were not considered as participants in development, but rather as pawns that sustain and maintain the real estate boom. As they are seen as potential home buyers of off-city housing projects that are constructed as a byproduct of PPP infrastructure projects. So let me introduce to you the Sitio San Roque community. It's a large urban poor community with an estimated 16,000 families residing at its peak. Currently, it's dwindled down to 6,000 families. It's walking distance to government offices, malls, transportation hubs, public hospitals, schools, and employment opportunities. The community has developed organically, incrementally, with residents themselves building their own houses, cementing the roads, creating water and electricity networks, and establishing their own institutional, recreational, and commercial spaces. So majority of the residents here are essential yet vulnerable low-wage workers. They work as construction workers, vendors, transport workers, home-based workers, and employees in informal institutions that are usually in precarious employment. Undoubtedly, they are indispensable to the functioning of the city. Cunanan highlights that this is a community that was developed by its residents in the absence of a state that can provide housing and affordable basic services. So as Sitio San Roque thrived and real estate land values in the area surged, various entities interested in the development of the area emerged also, with both the government and the private sector attempting to project global competitiveness in Quezon City. Sitio San Roque then became embroiled in intense speculation and profit-oriented development, leading to decades of assault on the urban poor residents. Aiming to transform the city into a center of gravity for business and collective good of constituents, the QCLGU, then headed by Mayor Sonny Belmonte, came up with the idea of the Quezon City Central Business District, or QCCBD, in 2006. They even sought the assistance of World Bank to determine the feasibility of this project. In 2007, former President Gloria Arroyo authorized the project through the issuance of EO 620 and EO 620A, which sped up the development of the North and East Triangles and also created the Urban Triangle Development Commission, which managed the development plan for the QCCBD. This commission is headed by the chairperson of HUDC, or the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council, and co-headed by the Office of the Mayor of QCLGU. The general manager of NHA is also a member of this commission. So in 2009, NHA jumped on a joint venture agreement with Ayala, the Ayala Land Incorporated, and in anticipation of the huge economic potential of the North Triangle being part of the Quezon City Business District. So this PPP materialized into the 29-hectare Vertis North project that we see now, that is still being built, that will basically refashion Sitio San Roque into a high-end central business and lifestyle district. This started the eviction of thousands of urban poor families in the community to make way for the Vertis North project. While the NHA has the relocation program for those to be displaced, only 1,924 out of the 6,485 remaining families, or roughly 30%, are qualified or deemed qualified by the housing agencies as beneficiaries. And 6 out of the 7 housing projects that have been built under this program are in off-city sites. So since then, the community has dealt with and survived various eviction tactics, from large-scale demolition threats, and fires. In 2010, they experienced a large-scale demolition that was assisted by around 300 police personnel. More than 100 families were left homeless afterwards. So in 2012, after the first large-scale demolition, the Ayala officially unveiled the Vertis North project to the public. Another one happened in 2014, wherein this time 1,000 police personnel employed brute force on residents, throwing tear gas canisters and weaponizing their guns to scare the residents. This resulted in the destruction of more than 300 families were left homeless afterwards. In 2015, the Strip Properties Incorporated, or SPI, joined in by purchasing a portion of the NHA share of land in the joint venture agreement, looking to also profit from the Vertis North. SPI, or the Strip Properties Incorporated, is the owner and operator of the Soler Resort and Casino. So what followed then was a slew of demolition threats from 2015 onwards until now. While these do not directly translate to complete destructions of homes in the community, this created a climate of fear and uncertainty among the residents. On the other hand, fire has also been observed to facilitate eviction. The National Housing Authority in particular, in one instance, in February 2019, has been documented to capitalize on these quote-unquote fire accidents by having residents sign a consent form to be relocated in the guise of giving aid. For the urban poor, these evictions are a threat not only to their lives, homes, and livelihood, but also to their aspirations for social mobility. Echoing Cortin and Claus and Manalili, and Inday Bagasbas, a community leader in the community, questions these developments. And I quote, "Bakit nananatili kaming mahirap? Umaasenso na kami pero ano bang ginagawa sa amin? Dinudurog ang mga bahay namin kasama ang mga kabuhayan namin. Laging sinasabi na uunlad ang lugar namin pero kaninong pagpapaunlad?" So the residents of Sitio San Roque did not simply stand by and watch the eviction take place. They utilized different creative tactics available to them to defend the community. These took the form of mobilizations, protest marches, noise barrages, prayer vigils, and community barricades. So on September 23, 2010, they put up the community barricade to resist the eviction. Different community leaders from various people's organizations in the community collectively designed what they call a defense plan. So each organization was assigned to defend a specific access point. Women were designated as human chain frontliners. Friends from the media, church groups, the academe, and NGOs were also requested to support. Residents fought using whatever is at their disposal, may it be bottles, debris, plastic bags filled with human excretion and fish intestines. This barricade compelled the then President Aquino to declare a 3-month nationwide moratorium on demolitions of urban poor communities. And these brought the right to housing and in-city housing advocacies and policy discussions. So the community in the following years has been subjected to divisive tactics by proponents of the project. So eviction activities changed largely from large-scale to incremental evictions. So while this also opened up democratic participation of the urban poor POs, this was only limited to POs that conceded to better than off-city resettlement. So there were lots of POs that were not included. POs who conceded were instructed also to tone down their demands for on-site housing and not to participate in any succeeding barricades or protests against the QCCBD and the Vertis North project. So this fueled the fragmentation of POs in the community. So one scheme that arise from this is the self-demolish or the voluntary dismantling scheme of NHA. So those who refuse to self-demolish are threatened from not receiving subsequent compensation packages or any socialized housing. This is specifically for the case of structure owners. Renters who are deemed usually not included in the socialized housing packages are rendered homeless and excluded. So these, especially those members of the community who are not affiliated into any people's organization, they are usually very vulnerable to this type of scheme. So SPI, or the Strip Properties, also joined in the NHA in facilitating eviction by making the area in which they intend to develop unlivable by setting up pig pens adjacent to housing units. They interfere with livelihood. POs that continued to struggle for on-site housing were subjected to intense policing and surveillance. So community leaders from Sitio San Roque have endured multiple visits from state forces, inviting them for so-called interviews and consultations. As noted by Resho and Dovi, the combination of coercion, the capitalization of community fragmentation, and intimidation takes the path of least resistance to ensure the incremental eviction of residents and clearing of segments in the community. So when the voluntary dismantling scheme of NHA became rampant, the community responded by negotiating with the housing agency that they be allowed to have houses rebuilt after only partial demolition. So you can see here, members call this effort of collectively rebuilding houses out of rubble as tumbalik. So basically, it's a combination of the words tumba, tumble, and balik, or re-erect or restore. To execute this, residents had to carefully monitor the actions of the demolition team to ensure that they would not completely tear down the houses. Another strategy that they developed was the assertion of temporary shelters. So this was done by negotiating with developers to secure the transfer of residents to temporary shelters, as seen in the screen. However, this is considered largely a last-ditch effort, mostly after tumbalik has already been done or any other actions have been already exhausted. So the Kalipunan ng Damayang Mahihirap in 2019 initiated what they call the Community Development Plan. So essentially, it's a counter-proposal to the development being built. So this was conceptualized coming from the recognition of the limits of tactics they previously employed and the need to create new forms of rights assertion and to get their message across in various arenas. So according to them, it's a counter-proposal as much as it's a campaign for alternative housing that espouses the residents' aspirations to participate in development and continue residing and working in the urban center. So the CDP, or the Community Development Plan as they call it, it's a technical endeavor and has 3 components: profiling, mapping, and planning. So these were carried out between April and December 2019. A participatory design process was employed to create it. So to plot and study the community spaces, the extent of encroachment and demolition, the profile of the community, the counter mapping and profiling of community members was undertaken. So data gathered here was used in piecing together social and spatial information of the community. This also helped participants gain a deeper understanding of the conditions of their fellow residents in the different areas in the community. So in planning the design of the CDP, a series of design workshops were conducted to assist participants in designing housing units and the site development plan for their CDP. So this helped residents identify their individual needs and wants, and also communicate their ideal housing typology. The needs of different sectors in the community was also taken into consideration in the design. So on December 9, 2019, the organization handed over the proposal to Mayor Joy. So representatives from the community engaged in a dialogue with the mayor to discuss their counter proposal. Thankfully, the Mayor Joy Belmonte acknowledged the strength of the people's planning process and promised a win-win situation for the community. So through these alternative practices of Sitio San Roque residents, spaces for democratic participation opened, such that it established continuous engagement with the QCLGU, which was previously, prior to the term of Mayor Joy Belmonte, was non-existent, and an avenue for negotiation of alternative housing was created. So currently, they are in talks with the Quezon City Housing Community Development and Resettlement Department for in-city housing. So these forms of resistance are a success for the residents of Sitio San Roque because not only they were able to confront the violence of mainstream development, but it also allowed them to be included in the process of development. This highlights the immense skill and the capability of the urban poor in deciding and asserting their right to development. So through the example of this community, the crucial role of people's participation in drawing equitable urban land use and development is highlighted. Such inclusive reimaginings of development are possible only if the poor and the most marginalized are included. With that, I conclude my presentation. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Arvin. Thank you for your presentation. We'll hear more of your thoughts during the opening forum. So now moving on, allow me to introduce our next and final presenter for this forum. He has a doctorate degree in watershed management and is a professor emeritus at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, IRNR College of Forestry and Natural Resources, and an academician at the National Academy of Science and Technology, Philippines. He finished his BS Forestry and MS Forestry at UPLB and his PhD in Watershed Management at the University of Arizona, USA. He is an executive member of the National Innovation Council of the Philippines, former UPLB Chancellor, former Dean, UPLB College of Forestry and Natural Resources, and former Director of Forestry Development Center, UPLB. We are very grateful to have him here on site. Once again, let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Rex Cruz.
Thank you very much, Zeki. And good morning to everyone. Maraming salamat sa PIDS for including me in this event. I think this is very important, and I'd like to express at the onset that I support the passage of the National Land Use Act. Been advocating for it for a long, long time, and I'm very sure that it will soon get passed. If we are able to explain why to the people who needs to make decisions on this. Sabi ko nga kanina, kung retireable lang itong kung retireable lang itong naluwa, nag-retire na rin ito eh. Retired na kasi ako, and I was still young when I was supporting the passage of National Land Use Act. But nonetheless, I'll be talking about one of our projects. Actually, two studies that we did. One, we're still doing it right now, and the other one we did in 2017 until 2019. That project in 2017 was about assessing the key policies related to watershed management. And that included land use policies, together with policies on mining, on establishment of watershed management councils, and also on payment for environmental services. And then, as an offshoot of that project, we had this project now, which is the first. I believe this is the first policy advocacy project funded by DOST, or at least by PCARD. And this was to follow through on the outputs of the policy studies that we conducted in 2017 and 2019. So my topic will be focusing on watershed-based integrated land use planning. And I'm very sure to some of you, this is quite a familiar topic, especially to my colleagues from forestry sector right here. One, my student, I think two former students right here. Anyway, let me begin with this. Oops. We're familiar with this. I think it has been presented in essence, by Dr. Navarro. And what this slide is showing is, we have land uses, and all of them are valid uses, together with mining. Regardless of how you feel about mining, to me, it's a valid use of the land resources, and that we all need these resources one way or another. but the problem is, any of these land uses have its consequences. They have consequences, and Dr. Navarro mentioned a lot about how the watersheds and ecosystems are actually being affected adversely by land uses, from urban to agriculture to forestry, and other land uses that we have. And the problem, of course, derives from a few things, like, for instance, inadequate planning, inadequate law enforcement, inappropriate location or inappropriate land use practices, and then fragmented land use and development plans, and then land conversion. And a lot of this have been mentioned already before. And this is where our problem begins. No, this is where our problem begins with these factors that we need to deal with, and that leads to problems like deforestation, ecosystem degradation, natural habitat loss, loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services, and so on. That, if we look at it all the way, that brings us to a condition where we are at the greater risk. If we're talking about climate change, we we are put in a position where we are at more risk, to climate change related hazards. I'll be providing a lot more evidence as to what Dr. Navarro provided to us in terms of the adverse impacts of land uses in our country. And here you will see the common drivers of deforestation in our country. And as you can see, number one is agricultural expansion, that including shifting cultivation. So if you combine shifting cultivation and agriculture, they actually account for a very large, very large portion of deforestation. So, and this is contrary, of course, to what we know, that logging is the major cause of deforestation in the country. More than 10,000 hectares or 10 million hectares of our forest lands have been commercially logged, but not all those that were logged, were could have been, not all of those logged areas, would have resulted to being degraded if they were not converted or used for agricultural practices. So that's where, again, that's where the problem is with the use of forests for timber harvesting. Timber harvesting is not bad in and of itself, but if it's done in a wrong way, and if it's not properly governed or administered by the government, then it becomes a problem. But nonetheless, what it's showing here is that agriculture is a major driver of deforestation. And this is where our project in 2017, 2019 comes in. A lot of discussions during that time was, how are we going to ensure that our watersheds will continue to thrive, in the face of climate change, while we are already dealing with, stressors, for a long, long time that relates to agriculture and other human activities. And in this study, we look at the policies related to land use, and this is where we had these key findings: inadequate vertical integration of planning systems, inadequate horizontal integration among LGUs, NGAs, and other land management levels. And then we recognize in that study that methodological frameworks exist, particularly the CLUP guidebook of 2014. I think this is a very useful, if we're actually using it properly. Rooms for improvement of application of bridge to reef watershed ecosystem management framework, were noted when we were doing that study. The general pattern of land use transitions in our country, starts from the forest being converted to either agroforestry or agriculture, and then agroforestry being converted or transitions to grassland and brushlands, and then it can transition back to forest actually, and then agriculture transitioning to urban or grassland, and then grassland and brushland can transition back to agriculture, and grassland can transition into urban, or it can transition into agroforestry. In other words, this is how we see land use dynamics in our country evolving through time. More evidences, that we have here. You can see that this is a cross-tab of land use profile in 2020 and 2010, and as you can see, the horizontal values for close forests. You can see there that in 2010, the built-up areas within close forest is 167 hectares. By the way, this data is from selected protected areas in Luzon. Okay, selected protected areas in Luzon. And what you can see here is that for these protected areas, close forest in 2010, 167 hectares are built up. Whereas when you look at the built-up areas in 2020, it becomes I can't see it very well. Built-up areas from 167 Hello. Oh, this one. Okay. Yeah. So the close forest in this protected areas, 167 hectares. That was in 2010. But then in 2020, the built-up areas increased to, sorry, I'm lost. Oh yeah, this is 2020 already, 167, and the 2010 is 10 hectares. That's more than 100. That's more than 100% change. And that is a trend. I do believe that it's a trend, nationwide. That built-up areas are increasing even in protected areas. I had one student studying, for instance, the impacts of creeping agricultural activities within the periphery of protected areas, and the finding is that these agricultural activities peripheral to protected areas are causing fragmentation of our protected areas. So there you see that agriculture and built-up areas are actually increasing, in the protected areas, and both of them are something that we don't want to proliferate or pervade, through time. And this is a simpler table, and as you can see here, from 2010, the built-up areas in protected areas is 5,264, and in 2020 it becomes 10,338, and then the annual crop increased from 69 to 73,000 hectares. The good thing is the close forest, is increasing, and that's good. I mean, that speaks of the success that we have in forest protection, and basically more on forest protection. And NGP has its contribution by way of reducing the brushland and grassland. Where's the open forest? Yeah. Well, it's supposed to be, a combined success of NGP for protection and for replanting or reforestation. But all the rest, they are actually decreasing, like open forest. But the open forest decrease here can be attributed to the increase in close forest. Again, as I said, when we are successful in protecting the open forest, then they become eventually close forest. But anyway, And here is selected areas of study during the 2017 study that I mentioned about. And here you can see annual crop within the forest reserve in one of the watersheds in Laguna, 535 hectares. And then in all others, you can see there that the annual crop is present in all the study watersheds that we had in 2017. And the built-up areas, this is in Ilocos Norte, this is in Davao, and this is in Isabela, and this one is in Bukidnon. And as you can see, built-ups, are present in these areas. They're not supposed to be there, but they're there, and that that actually tells us something is we're not really effective in making sure that those areas that are not supposed to be used for some or certain purposes are being used. And this one is for the 18 major river basins. You can see here those that are in color, those are coded in red. Bicol River Basin, Buwayan, Malungon, Ilog, Hilbangan, Halaur, Panay, Pasig, Laguna. They are all, experiencing very low forest cover. For instance, the forest cover of Bicol River Basin is down to 10%. Buwayan, Malungon, 5%, and 2% for Ilog, Hilabangan, and 2% for Halaur, and these are evidences that our watersheds are being hit, by our inefficiency or our weakness to govern or to manage properly our land uses. And when we look at the forest land, the same story. We have in areas. Well, this slide is showing us that the proportion of A&D and forest lands presents a challenge, in managing land uses, because there are river basins with much more forest lands than A&D lands or alienable and disposable lands. And if that is combined with high population density, then that becomes a problem for controlling the use of forest lands, because of the limited alienable and disposable lands. And and there, we have an issue of how do we balance now the need of a growing population with the limited land that is supposed, can be used only for economic, and production purposes. This one is, I'm not sure whether everyone is familiar with the priority watersheds. The priority watersheds are watersheds that are identified by NIA, by PMB and FMB of DNR as watersheds that are important for irrigation and biodiversity conservation. And here you can see that most of the priority watersheds are, have increasing cultivated coconut plantation areas, the red ones. We cannot see, unfortunately, the legend here. But the red ones represent the cultivated areas, and mostly coconut areas, that are included in this expanding agricultural activities in priority watersheds. Again, these watersheds are important for biodiversity and for irrigation purposes. This is a modeling that we did for the Manila Bay Basin way back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And as you can see here, the trend of urban growth, in red color, is going to expand as expected, because of growing population. But what is interesting here is that if we look at on this eastern side, of the basin, which is basically, this is where you have the Sierra Madre, we see that the urban growth is actually creeping up to the ridges or to the higher elevations of Sierra Madre. And that is, again, a challenge of governance of land use. And this is for the Laguna Lake Basin, and Laguna Lake Basin we know is rapidly urbanizing, and again, that is going to be a problem. If you saw the slide of land conversion of irrigated lands of Dr. Navarro, you probably have noticed that the highest is in Region 3, followed by Region 4A. And in Laguna, most of the irrigated lands in districts 1 and 2 are basically gone. That gave way to urban development already, and it's going all the way to District 3 and 4. And this is what I'm saying. You combine the limited A&D land with high population density, then you have a perfect recipe for land use conflicts. Land that are not supposed to be for habitation or for economic activities now being used because of the limited lands that are supposed to be allocated for habitation and human and economic activities. Yeah. So yeah. All right. So that brings me to, with the remaining minutes that I have, that brings me to what we're doing right now. We are, as I said, this is an advocacy project that is being funded by the OST, and this is in support of the implementation of a watershed as platform for land use planning. So section 4.1 ng HLURB guidebook, it says there, watershed is supposed to be used as a planning platform. And the main reason for that is, as what we saw already from the evidences of deteriorating, degrading watersheds. Land use activities, ang casualty niyan usually is watershed. Watershed and its ecosystems. Pag hindi natin na manage properly ang mga land uses, that's usually tatamaan yan ay ang ating mga watersheds. And that is why watershed now is being used as a platform in order to protect the watersheds and its ecosystems while we use the land to achieve our socioeconomic development goals. And that is what we're trying to support in this project, to make sure that there is a showcase or examples or models by which the watershed is used as platform for land use planning in a robust way, or in a proper way, okay, so that we can cash in on the benefits that are supposed to be being promised by the watershed approach. Ito yung aspirations ng guidebook, Ito yung aspirations ng guidebook, and as you can see here, integration of sectors, integration of public-private land use management, inter-LGU and interagency, collaboration. These are all what we want to see, right? These are all what many, would like to see happening on the ground, especially in relation to land. In relation to land use. And the approach is using the watershed as a platform. Because the watershed is a unit, is a physical unit with a defined boundary that provides a venue for us for assessing integratively the interactions of natural systems and human systems. For assessing the integrated, the interactions of ecosystems and human activities. That's what we can do inside the watershed that is not possible in using any other physical framework. So, another term that the guidebook is using is the reach to reef approach. The reach to reef approach is not necessarily equivalent to watershed approach, because the reach to reef approach includes the marine part. It has a marine component. The watershed approach only has a terrestrial component. Okay? But when you put that into the context of reach to reef approach, that means that the management of land uses in the terrestrial part, which is the watershed part, should consider what will be the consequences on the marine part. And that is why it becomes the reach to reef approach, and that is exactly what we want to see, and what the guidebook also is prescribing. To look at land use decisions, and how they will affect, not only the terrestrial part of the watershed, but also what will happen to the marine part that is connected with the watershed part of the reach to reef unit. And siguro ang kailangan ko na lang emphasize dito, pag reach to reef approach kasi, or the use of the watershed as a planning platform, ang common conception kasi dito, understanding of people is that, when we do CLUP, kinakailangan merong watershed component, watershed management component. Without realizing that the entire CLUP is your watershed management. Because everything that you do inside the watershed, whatever land use activities you have there, that is your watershed management. And hence, the watershed approach really means that, when you make land use decisions, when you allocate your land, if you are an LGU, your one of your main criteria nga, no? One of your main criteria for making a decision, as to whether, you are allocating it properly or not, is how will it affect, the watershed and the ecosystem services inside it. So yun ang tanong, no? And not putting into the land use plan a section for watershed management or protection. The entire country subdivided into watershed, no? Kaya okay lang na gamitin talaga siya for land use planning, no? Because practically nothing is outside watersheds, no? This is a town in La Union, where we are working with and providing support in updating their CLUP using the reach to reef approach. And then this is La Union. La Union will be the first province where we will try to adopt the reach to reef approach for updating their provincial physical development framework plan. No? Sila yung kauna-unahan. Why? Because wala pa talagang guidelines yan. The guidelines is still being prepared. And the target is within 3 to 5 years, a new guideline prescribing the use of the watershed or the reach to reef approach, for updating PDP-FP. For now, what we have is reach to reef approach or watershed approach to CLUP. So this is how it really goes. If you have a watershed, if you are the mayor of one town, your concern is to identify where is your watersheds. If you have 4 watershed in your town, your first task is to understand what kind of zoning is best for each of these watershed. In other words, the best zoning is one that will ensure the protection of ecosystem services of all these watersheds. So you zone first all of these watershed in a way that will protect the ecosystem services. And you can include there that will optimize, the benefits that you get out of each of the watershed. And then use that as your physical framework for updating your CLUP. Meaning your CLUP must then be aligned with the zoning of each of the watersheds that you are straddling or occupying. Pinapatapos na ako. Okay. So this is this is what we do. This is in Los Baños, one of our pilot LGU. So what we did was to zone each of these watersheds. I think there are 16 watersheds inside Los Baños. We zone each one of them, and those zoning, pinili namin yung may mga options to zone, different options yan. And the one that we choose are supposed to be, or is supposed to be the zoning that will protect the ecosystem services of each of the watershed. And then once zoned, we then updated the CLUP using the zoning of each of the watershed. So if the zoning in the watershed says that this area should be protected, CLUP must align with that. The use that they must assign to that zone should be protection. I know that there are questions to that, no? Paano kung meron ng nakatayo dong structure that cannot be demolished anymore, for some reason? What happens? Mamaya siguro may magtatanong yan. So yeah, so basically this is what happens. You have alternative zoning for each of the watershed. What we do is to normally look at what will be the impacts on the benefits or ecosystem services from the watershed. So with this zoning, you have the protection, you have the agriculture, and the red you have the urban. If your allocation is 40-40-20, how does that translate to water, to species richness, to food? Meron pang isang column, hindi na nakita, no? So may value ka dyan. And then another option is this one. You have 30, 45, 25%, and then you have this value for ecosystem services, and then you have a third option, where you have another proportion of the different major zones. And then you choose on this basis, or the decision makers can choose for themselves what they want, which one they prefer, okay, depending on their aspirations. So they can choose whatever. They can choose this because their priority is food production, for instance, or they can use this because their priority is biodiversity. But yeah, you can use optimization here, in this case. But this is what watershed approach is all about. Zone the watershed in the best way that will protect the watershed and its ecosystem services, and then use that zoning as the basis for land allocation or for assigning land to different uses. So I think I'll stop here. Meron pa ata akong few more slides, but I'll stop here. It's okay. Just to give way to the open forum. Sige. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rex. Before we proceed with the program's opening forum, and while our team is arranging the chairs and tables, I would like to introduce our moderator for this morning. Our moderator, aside from being a senior research fellow here at PIDS, he is the officer in charge of the Research Information Department and the project manager of SERP-P. May I invite on stage Dr. Sunny Domingo. And I would like to invite also our research speakers to sit here in front. No?
Yeah, but it's better for me to stand up.
Okay.
Okay, good morning. We are now opening the floor for your questions and the answers from our invited speakers. May I request our presenters to join me in front? Dr. Cruz, Dr. Navarro, Mr. Pumalanta. I guess given the three very nice presentations, we don't need an additional impetus to look at our supposed policy on national land use and sectoral land use. So I guess this forum will allow us to discuss in details your questions and possibly the need to clarify certain sections of their presentations. So may I now open the floor for your questions? For those with us here at PIDS, you may raise your hand. So when asking your question, please identify yourself and your respective institution. For our Zoom and Facebook Live participants, you can post your questions. We'll try to answer them. So let's start. Anybody from our conference room? Yes, ma'am, please.
So from the DAPN. Sige. So the it's a good three types of presentation that was presented. No, first one is the national, the framework. Then there's one which is really natural resource, the component, the natural resource segment, and then we have the urban. I'm just asking because years ago, I have a consultant who told me, why are we talking about natural resources in NCR, in Metro Manila, when there's not even trees and something, in the area, something like that. No? So the concept of the watershed seems lost in this person. No? But I'm just asking that, I just thought about that, just to also flag yung how do we reconcile yung issue ng urban poor, no? Because in many ways, the issues in the urban areas like flooding and everything, these are of course manifestations of climate change issues, no? And also a loss also of biodiversity and ecosystem degradation. But the struggle of urban poor are real, no? Economic, no, their lives, no. But they are also in many ways located in areas that are dangerous, hazardous, no. So that's it's something that I want to reconcile also. How do we address yung national land use framework na to in this concept, in this context, no? These are very, I don't think it's very simple issues, but how do we figure in the issue of natural resources also in Metro Manila, something like that? Because what Dr. Rex is presented is really clearly, no, based on the ecosystem. So how do we also communicate this, no, especially to lawmakers, no, and even in the even among the urban poor, no, the issues related to this one, climate change, natural resources, and then here's the land use. We know the importance of protecting them, and yet there's the equally important issue of economic, no, and lives, no, and livelihood.
Okay, so that's our first question. Who wants to answer first? Okay, Dr. Adora.
I'll start first. So your basic question is how do we reconcile this? How do we communicate this to our lawmakers? Actually, the advocates have communicated this already. The evolution of the current draft of the NALUA reflects that. No, and I did not discuss legislation design because that's gonna be long. But everyone is invited to look at the various versions of bills on the NALUA that are on file now in the current Congress, at the 19th Congress, Senate bills, there are various there. And in the lower house, there is already a consolidated bill, HB 80162, if I remember it right. and the principles that you mentioned that need to be considered are there, no? Consideration for urban development, consideration for hazards and risks due to climate change, consideration for protection of natural resources, and including those that can still be found in the NCR. You should hire a different consultant next time, no? Someone who understands that NCR also needs protection. And yun nga, in the legislation design, the principles of land use planning are there. Now you got to have areas allocated for production, for protection. You have to carve out areas which need to be protected for settlements development and also for infrastructure development. And there are also sections in the draft bills on special areas of concern, no? Like the need to address issues related to coastal zones. And that's, by the way, that's a more recent development kasi in the previous versions of the NALUA, coastal zones are not there. So aside from the rift to ridge approach, so coastal zones are also included, no? And even tourism development. Tourism development is another special area of concern in the current version of the NALUA. So it's really in the legislative design, and the design has been communicated to the lawmakers. So what we're calling for is, have active deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Navarro. Probably later on, we'll ask our other speakers to contribute, no? Because I think the other questions will be very much related to the first question. Can we have another question from the floor? Yes, please.
Yes, good morning po. Timothy Solomon po from the Land Coalition in the Philippines. Representing din po yung campaign for land use policy now. Yes po. Maraming salamat po sa inyong presentation, sa inyong studies. Party po kami dun sa mga advocates na binabanggit naman na nagko-communicate sa legislators on the passage of the National Land Use Act. And I believe naman po lahat po dito tayo ay advocates ng National Land Use Act. Particularly, I wanted to commend si Dr. Navarro kasi she's been working with us for a long time on advocating for the National Land Use Act. Alam ko po nung nasa NEDA pa ho kayo, meron na po tayong ginagawang pagsusulong nito at gusto rin po namin tanungin actually kung ano po yung naging progress dun sa work kasi alam naman po natin na yung sa legislative mill may mga bara na nangyayari. Ayoko na po sabihin yung mga pangalan. Pero may pagbabara na nangyayari and we've actually explored an executive pathway towards the enactment of a land use policy. So, alam ko po sa NEDA po sa isa sa mga primary pong proponents nun. Baka meron po kayong updates nun sa paggalaw ng possible national policy sa executive branch. Another question din po, and also a suggestion. Meron po akong napansin dun sa presentation ni si Dr. Cruz, dun sa watershed analysis. Perhaps I suggest po actually to have a third level of analysis do sa watershed kasi tinanan po natin yung forest and A&D. Meron po kasi yung third category na ancestral domains. And kung papansinin natin doon sa lahat ng recovery areas na positive, ancestral domains sila lahat. Meron tong dalawang ancestral domain na in the red zone, yung endangered, pero those are conflict areas. Meaning to say there are land use conflicts. Yung Halaur, Cagayan de Oro, military reservation yung Halaur, Cagayan de Oro is, yun nga po nabanggit nyo, may ongoing creeping into of urbanization. Even Metro Manila, we could consider our watersheds kind of healthy because may tubig pa rin. Pero nag-creep yung urbanization and it actually has particular impacts dun sa territorial governance ng mga katutubo. Kasi 100% actually ng tubig na Metro Manila comes from Sierra Madre, which is governed by indigenous peoples. So, baka pwede po natin tingnan ng ganung perspective. May muka yung watershed management. In fact, may numero na yon, 90% ng watershed na healthy sa Pilipinas ay katutubo. And as a parallel po actually doon, ang gusto ko pong bagitin kasi meron na kaming na-file na bill din on indigenous community conserved areas na nagsusulong ng pagpoprotekta ng yung mga sacred areas sa mga katutubo that provide ecosystem services for all. And meron na rin pong ginagawa yung recognition of community conserved areas sa DNR, yung pagbuo ng polisiya on ganito as a parallel to protected areas. Baka pwede pong tingnan yun, and we actually offer all of the projects that we have done. Baka pwede maging collaboration natin to pilot test yung watershed approach. Kasi ginagawa na po namin yun, we could share on how to do it in our areas, agriculture and forestry. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those questions. Let's start with the first question. I think it's very much related to numerous questions posted online. No? They were talking about the national land use policy that we have been advocating for the passing of the law for probably more than a decade now. So the main question is, given all the issues, the concerns, and the supposed benefits from a National Land Use Act, why are we still waiting for the passing of such legislation? Maybe I'll ask first Dr. Cruz. Dr. Cruz, you've been advocating for watershed management, no? And it's a big part of our supposed land use governance advocacy. No? I know that for 3 decades you've been publishing on this. What can you say about the very slow progression towards us coming up with a national policy on land use? But even also given the multitude of conflicts that you also presented earlier.
Yeah. I think it's it's an issue of power distribution among stakeholders. There are stakeholders that are really, really very strong in pushing for their interest. And I think you know some of them, no? And ako kasi I've been attending yung committee hearing ng NALUA, no, between 1995 and 2000, no? And I saw power play, even during the committee hearings, no? And for as long as we cannot manage this power distribution, and that there is one that will dominate against, especially if it's, if their position is against NALUA, then that's a barrier, I think, that has been there for a long time. Now, that is not to say that there is a lack of understanding, na walang cognitive barrier, in terms of how useful or how needful we are of a national land use policy framework. I do believe that there's still that barrier that we need to cross. And then ano pa ba? And because it's not a popular demand. I don't think the grassroots is is even engaged in this in this issue, simply because they believe that land use is something that they hold in their hands. Even at the grassroots, I think people believe that they have the power over the land that they have, whether they have formal rights or informal rights or anything like that.
I think Mr. Dimolanta will have something to say about that, because he was talking about empowered people with the absence of bureaucratic action. So, please.
Responding to that, but definitely yung Land Use Act would be very helpful in identifying the particular uses of land, because right now mostly it's the LGUs who are deciding this. So, local vested interests are seen din sa land use plan. So with the national land use, it becomes more rational and objective. But definitely, I think in the composition of the NLOC, there needs to be more stronger representation from the civil society, because as highlighted in the paper of Dr. Navarro, there are lots of concerns from civil society like displacement, dispossession. So as long as there is representation from civil society, there are safeguards to protect the marginalized from further being vulnerable. Ayun, yan lang.
Well, you mentioned about vested interest. I think we are playing with conflicts of vested interests, sector-wise. You have so many sectors, so many demands, and essentially very limited or finite resource in terms of available land. The next question is for Dr. Navarro, and I'll be adding to that question because we have an added inquiry from Yusek Pangulayan of DAR. Okay, so given the earlier manifestations, he was also asking about possible comments on the article by Dr. Shelito Habito, published May 2023. He was talking about land use conversion. The good professor says that surprisingly, the fear that we're losing our farms in the face of land conversions appears to be a myth. World Bank data show that our agricultural area as a percentage of our fixed total land area actually kept expanding over time up to the present. So Representative Joey Salceda also mentioned that we are already cultivating non-arable lands. In any event, there is really a need for a National Land Use Act to rationalize land use and avoid tug of war among agencies. So please, Dr. Navarro.
Okay, I won't say whether it's a myth or not, no, but I would like to ask Dar first, what does the data say on illegal and premature land use conversion? What the data is saying on the aggregate areas, irrigated lands, which have been converted to non-agri uses, what the data are saying is that the conversion has been large, no? And I mentioned earlier that we do not know whether many of these are illegally and prematurely converted. So we need DAR data, and Yusek Pagulayan hopefully could help us, no, so that we can have a definite conclusion. But I mentioned that that is a frequently recurring argument. I'm not saying that the conclusion is already final, no. What I'm saying is that this is a frequently recurring argument, and we need to examine this further by looking at illegal and premature land use conversion and validating whether it's really a huge concern that conversion has been increasing. I would like to comment, by the way, on the first question, kasi our partner from the NGO sector
Why very slow?
Asked about a sort of progress report, no. That's when I left, no, because during my term, we were having a difficulty, finding a sponsor, and but we managed to include the prioritization of the NALUA in the LEDAC and also in the State of the Nation address. It was mentioned 3 times. But in the current Congress, I'm no longer part of NEDA, but there are NEDA representatives here. In the current Congress, the NEDA and particularly the NLUC is pushing for the enactment of that and actively joining hands with other members of the executive to formulate an executive version of the NALUA. And in the lower house, the progress is that there is now a consolidated bill So there's a consolidated na LUA bill in the lower house, but in the Senate, wala pa. So that's ano, that's the progress report right now.
Thanks, Dr. Navarro. Probably, yep. I'll ask Dr. Cruz to answer. But before he answers, I'll just add another premise behind the first question raised. Dr. Cruz earlier manifested that 76% of tree cover loss are in areas where drivers are predominant. And when talking about drivers, he was talking about number one, agricultural production as the main cause, no, of our deforestation. In another slide, he also presented the diagram in terms of the process of conversion. No? And he was talking about forests being made into agri-forestry related cultivation. Then it becomes converted down the line, no, until all the other urbanization elements come into play. So a very big question. We've been talking about promoting socioeconomic progression in the hinterlands, and a big part of that is agroforestry. But given the data, given the numbers, that this is actually conflicting in terms of us protecting our natural resources cover-wise. No? What can you say about that, Dr. Cruz?
Yeah. Land use, land use condition or land use profile of the country is very, very dynamic, no? That's why I showed the graphics, illustrating how one land use transitions to another, how forests transition to agriculture, to agroforestry, and so on. And when you have this kind of dynamics ongoing in land uses, you will be shifting in terms of, you may at some point in time, see that the total of a particular land use, such as, for instance, agriculture, remains constant, or is the same, or is even increasing, and that could be, true. But the issue there, there are problematic issues there. One is, what is the quality? What is the quality of the agricultural areas? Are they remaining the same, even if the area are the same? Now, data were presented, for instance, by Dr. Navarro in her presentation. Most of the land conversions are actually in premium agricultural land, which is irrigated. And those are to be those are supposed to be the best agricultural lands that we have. So if we lose them, we are actually losing a lot in terms of production potential. Now, when we convert agricultural land, that's not the end of agriculture. It creates a demand to expand agriculture, to look for compensation or compensatory land that can replace the land that has been lost through conversion. And again, that's global, convert land, convert agriculture to other uses. There will be a demand to compensate for that losses, and that can explain why, at any given point in time, or at some point in time, there appears to be, a stable or even increasing agricultural land. But the question is, how about the production potential? How about the quality of what is there remaining? Now, how about the seeming conflict, between promoting socioeconomic development among upland communities, by promoting sustainable farming activities like agroforestry farms? Is that a conflict? Actually, if it's agroforestry, and that's what we are advocating as well. When we want to allow the people to to engage in farming in upland areas or forest areas, we want them to adapt a system that can be sustainable and that can be compatible with the protection of the ecosystems. And that is actually where agroforestry comes in. Agroforestry is a compromise, actually. It's a compromise farming system that combines the production of agricultural crops as well as combining them with forest crops in order that the agroforestry farms can continue to mimic or imitate the ecosystem services being provided for by natural forest ecosystems. So, agroforestry itself is a compromise. It's a compromise system that will allow people to farm forest lands, but also protect the forest ecosystems. But other farming systems like kaingin or slash and burn or open cultivation, those are some things those are practices that will run conflict, indirect conflict with forest conservation.
Thank you, Dr. Cruz. So there is a responsible way for us to use and harvest the land, no? And that pertains to responsible agroforestry as well, no? Because we can't stop people from trying to have their livelihoods, no, in the hinterlands. I'm trying to distill the multitude of questions from Zoom and Facebook. And I think related to something like that is the manifestation of bureaucratic inefficiency when we see improper conversion of land, no, from food production to other uses. A related question to that is, given that bureaucratic action or inaction, in some cases or in most cases, probably are inappropriate, what can we take away in terms of LGU's participation? No, the three of you also mentioned LGUs as a primary mover in terms of us grounding land use policy. But is a potential NALUA going to diminish or increase the authority or responsibility of our subnational bureaucratic organizations? That includes our provincial and municipal and city governments. Who wants to answer first?
You're delving into legislation design already, and actually the answer there is that since there will be a legislation and there will be rules on production uses, settlement uses, infrastructure development uses, and protection, no, violations will be met with sanctions and penalties. But it doesn't mean that when we implement the rules, it doesn't mean that we are lessening the optimization of benefits from land. We are trying to rationalize things, and by harmonizing the different restrictions, the different rules, and finding ways to optimize the benefits while minimizing negative externalities, I believe we empower LGUs to benefit from the use of land. No, I think that's how we should view it. No, the presence of sanctions and penalties in the proposed legislation is not meant to disempower LGUs. It is meant for all stakeholders, for all potential violators, and the benefits are meant for all stakeholders also.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I think another dimension to that answer is, well, even with the presence of a national guiding legislation on land use, eventually it's still the LGU who's going to implement a lot of those cascaded policies, and that is very visible in so many of our national legislations, thematic legislations. Probably I'll ask RP, Mr. Dimalanta, in terms of urbanization, in terms of human settlement, housing, or informal settlers, how do you think are they going to be benefited or probably empowered or disempowered by additional policy on land use?
For me, the National Land Use Act would probably help civil society and communities in terms of having specific space for settlements. Just to give a figure, in the data of DSHUD, as of November 2022, only 311 out of 1,634 LGUs have local shelter plans. So that means local shelter plans are basically their guiding book where they would put the socialized housing. So without this, they don't have any plans for housing. So when you have some sort of a national framework that defines that these specific areas are for settlements, then they're really forced to create a shelter plan to coincide with the national land use plan. So I think it would benefit greatly, especially for LGUs who aren't really doing their job in creating these shelter plans.
So it's going to provide structure to what they're doing right now, planning and development wise. Okay, I think we are quickly losing time. No, I'll open another question from the floor. Yes, please.
Good morning po sa ating lahat. Engineer Jonis Concepcion from NCIP. My question is with the topic of Ma'am Doc Navarro regarding conflicting land issues. So what would having these conflicting land issues, how will this NALUA resolve the conflicting issues, like for example, between and among DNR and DAR and CIP? How will this NALUA resolve these issues? And what will be the implication of this NALUA to ancestral domains, considering that ancestral domain cover vast tract of lands and hectareage? It includes not only the forest, but it also includes even their waters. Also, I would like, paminsana na ma'am, I would like, I have a curious question also on how will this NALUA resolve, like for example, those land use that they were reserved, for example, for a certain land use, but now the current usage is different from its reservation purpose. And also, there is an ongoing JMC between and among the RDNR and CIP and LRA. What's the implication of this NALUA on this matter? Yan po, ma'am. Sir, thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think that first question is very much related to the earlier question raised by our friend there. He was talking about possibly a third level in the frame. No? Aside from watershed, you have ancestral domains. Well, as probably explained earlier by Dr. Cruz, there's no possible, well, probably there's no distinction between the two. Watersheds may be within ancestral domains, or the ancestral domains may cover part of the watersheds, right, sir? Okay, so probably you can answer. Who wants to answer? Dr. Cruz or Dr. Navarro? NCIP's essential interest, no, when it comes to land use policy.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, she has a direct question to me kasi. Yeah. So,
Okay, Dr.
and
Navarro,
perhaps
please.
your you remember the slide on land use conflicts affecting peace and development, and I mentioned your agency NCIP. Well, it's again in the legislation design, and if there will be a national law wherein all of us agencies in the executive will align with, and our constituents will align with, in your case the indigenous people, then there can be a rhyme and reason in the way we allocate land uses, and in the way we settle overlapping claims with the other stakeholders, particularly in ancestral domains. Now there are overlapping claims with agrarian reform beneficiaries and military reservations and other presidential proclamations related to conservation and protection. No? So if there is that national level legislation, then we can align with that. The decisions on how to settle the overlapping claims will be based on that. And who will help enforce the decision? A body, an executing body. And that is also part of the legislation design. A body that will be the expert on land use issues will be set up, and the organizational structure at the regional level and local level, LGU level, will also have to align with the intent of that national level body. It doesn't mean that there should be, an executive office down to the LGU level, no. But it means that the law will provide a structure for enforcing up to the LGU level the land use laws through a local land use bodies, LGU land use bodies. So that's the intention. And if we will schedule deliberations, schedule discussion, then perhaps there will be what was mentioned earlier, na popular demand, no? We should have that popular demand for the enactment of a NALUA. So, and this, I believe, is our contribution to that, to that also advocacy. To have,
So we need that push, that very big
to have a popular demand for a NALUA.
Thank you, Dr. Navarro. So many questions. Unfortunately, we have very limited time. So we have to conclude our question and answer portion of this seminar. But before we end, may I request our resource speakers to give their final closing remarks. May I start with Mr. Demalanta, please? Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I would just like to emphasize the importance of grassroots representation in the NLOC. I'm not sure if it's already there, but I remember looking at the bills earlier last year and seeing that there's there's very marginal representation. So I'm hoping that the final bill would really incorporate that, and that would assure, I think, the equitable land use, which also respects indigenous people's rights in the land use, the urban poor's rights to land and housing. So, okay, yun na po. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demalanta. Dr. Navarro, your final thoughts?
I'll be very brief. Now na. Naluwa na. Now na.
We hope that our legislators are also in attendance virtually. Dr. Cruz, please, your final thoughts.
Sana nga mapas na yan ngayon. But let me just say a few things, no, yung sa relating to indigenous communities, no. Because IPs are, or have vast lands, within their custody. I think it's to the best interest of IPs to be willing to work with our stakeholders to do a comprehensive land use and development plan across landscape, across rich reef landscape, for instance. There are areas where we work, where indigenous communities are very, very open and, willing participants to this kind of a process. But there are also a lot of areas where indigenous peoples are hesitant to participate. And I do hope that, NCIP can do something about that, because I personally believe that it is to the best interest of IPs to be part of a comprehensive process when we talk about land use development. And then gusto ko sana kanina magdagdag doon sa yung accountability mechanism,
Please,
you know,
please, you can add.
that will be included dun sa National Land Use Act, you know, and how it will benefit the LGUs. Remember, you know, in a ridge reef landscape, maraming LGUs nagsishare dyan, eh, no? The same watershed, they share the same watershed, and yet, you know, not all LGUs are the same. Some are going to be very responsible, you know. Some are going to be very, very careful in the way they use their land resources, but some will be, you know, some will not be, you know. Some will not even, you know, worry about protecting, you know, the environment and the ecosystem services. And, you know, if you have those kinds of combination in a particular watershed or ridge reef landscape unit, setting in an accountability mechanism will be for the best interest of all the LGUs sharing the same watershed. And I think that's, you know, that's one good thing that we can see, you know, if NALUA pass, you know, that there will be accountability mechanisms, which has been absent, you know, in the past. No one gets imprisoned, you know, for flooding or for landslide or for deforestation, no? No one. But, you know, that's exactly what we need. Because when, you know, somebody's mistake is the misery of all. And, you know, if we don't have any accountability mechanisms, impossible to right that kind of a situation.
Thank you very
National
much.
Land Use Act.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cruz. And thank you very much to our very amazing resource speakers. And of course, to you guys for your very active participation. Not only those present here, but also those joining us via Zoom and Facebook Live. Let's give everyone, our resource speakers and you, as our participants, a very big round of applause. Thanks again. I now turn over the floor to Zeki, our MC. Zeki.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sunny. To our presenters, please stay on front so that we can award our certificate of appreciation and a small token of appreciation. Allow me to read the citation of the certificate to our speaker for presenting his study, to Mr. Rafael Vicente de Malanta for presenting his study on urban poor land and housing struggles in Metro Manila during the SERP-P Knowledge Sharing Forum on the theme State of Land Use Policy and Governance in the Philippines, given this 25th day of March 2024 at the PIDS Conference Hall, signed by Dr. Aniceto C. Orbeta. Okay, a photo op for each presenter, please. Starting with Mr. De Malanta. Okay. Okay, next for Dr. Rex Cruz. Okay, one more pa pala. Last, sir. Okay, next si Dr. Rex Cruz po. Sir. Okay. Yes. Okay, next, Dr. Adora Navarro. And yon. And then after Dr. Navarro, we'll have a group photo po for all the presenters. And then, lastly, yung ating pong group photo with the participants. Okay? Okay, and lastly, for our presenters on stage, please. So, Dr. Rex, here on front po. Last photo po. Tayo po lahat. Yes po. With the present. Sige po, Ma'am Adora. Ito po muna. Dr. Sunny, share picture po with, sige po. Ayan. Okay. Before we end, we would like to award the winners for our raffles for our on-site participants. First, with from the Development Academy of the Philippines, Miss Dorothea Boy Navarro, you will have a token of appreciation from our secretariat, and then from the National Land Coalition in the Philippines, Sir Timothy will also receive a gift, and Engineer Jones Concepcion from NCIP will also receive a gift from PIDS. So congratulations to the winners. Once again, we appreciate your attendance today. The presentation of the speakers will be available on the PIDS website. Meanwhile, you may download a copy of the study from the link provided in the chat box of Zoom participants. And please help us improve our webinars. Kindly answer our feedback form through the link flash on your screen and provided on the chat box. For those watching us via Facebook Live, the link is shared in the comments box as well. Please note that the e-certificate for our online participants will be sent to your email automatically following the submission of the feedback form. So for our upcoming webinars, keep in touch with us visiting the PIDS website, and follow us on PIDS and SERP-P Facebook pages, Twitter or X, YouTube channel, and LinkedIn for more updates. We hope to have you again in our future events. And finally, we'd like to extend our gratitude to our various organizations from the government, academe, civil service organization, and other international organizations and private sectors for joining us. Building upon Dr. Arbeta's opening remarks, let's reflect on our shared responsibility in safeguarding our land resources for the future. This has been your host, Zeke Nicomedes. Maraming salamat po at magandang umaga sa ating lahat. For our on-site participants, may we request all of you to come here on front para mag-picture lang po. Okay. Usog lang natin ating table. Sige po. Dito po tayo. Last photo po with the presenters po. Okay. Sir Sunny? Front po. Sige po, dito po tayo lahat. Janina, photo ka na lang din ng phone Reniel. Dito tayo. Okay. Arvin. Sige. Okay. Ito po, gitna po kayo. Okay ba? Nagkakahiyaan po tayo. Sige po,